Hello and welcome to today's webinar on securing your journey towards digital change. My name is Morten Jorgensen. I'm a director with research and consulting company RBR in London, and I will be your host today. My two guests are Daniel Lanecki, who is head of security at British bank Barclays, and Evgenia Ostrovskaya, who is business development director of retail and banking Europe at Genetec. Welcome to you both. Now, before we start, I should mention that you can submit any questions that pop to your mind as we go along by using the Twitter account, which is at Genetec, GENETEC_Europe. So please tweet your questions as we go along. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Eve.
Hi, Morten. Thank you for having us here today. A little bit about the idea of this webinar. As we're working with our customers in the banking sector, we see that there are three main areas for the improvement. Firstly, a lot of banking security are based on the system designed in silos, each designed for a single purpose and not really tailored for specific needs for corporate building or the branch. These days, using disconnected system is completely underutilizing the technology. Second area is cybersecurity. We see that there are a lot of areas of vulnerabilities in physical security solutions. Now, any IP device can bring a threat to cybersecurity of the bank, well, to any end user, but the bank is a vulnerable piece. When we speak about connectivity of these devices, there's no more really like third-party integration. I call it N-party integration. What I mean is that you don't really know who is outsourcing to whom the components of the solution. So when you think about it, it can be 3, 5, 10 levels of outsource components with different manufacturers, and strategy of cybersecurity must take it into consideration. And thirdly, once we have all the data from different source points like cameras, access control, ATM software, why don't we use it to understand more of a business insight, to go beyond security? We can analyze footfall in the branch, we can utilize the video security to understand queues, or even to understand if the layout is the most optimal for that building. So based on that, we came up with an idea to create the banking working group where security departments in the banks could share experiences, challenges, and strategies. As we're now in lockdown, we decided to go ahead and move it into virtual environment, not to wait. Daniel was very kind to join us today, and we're going to talk to him about Barclays and his own view on security industry and about specific needs going into the Barclays security renovation project. And also who was involved in the project of the scale on the company level and how decisions get made. So let's get straight into it. Daniel, thank you for joining us. Can you please tell us, what do you do in Barclays?
Hi, Eve. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, so I'm the head of technology for strategy and plan in technical security, looking after a global footprint in Barclays for the corporate and retail estates, roughly around 311 corporate sites, which include multi-story tenant buildings, and around 1,000 retail branches that we have. I joined Barclays around 3.5 years ago to deliver a security program and to have a look at how we can improve our space, what innovation we can introduce, how can we utilize the innovation from those technologies to move towards a much more comprehensive solution and get value out of what we actually trying to do at the back of the security solutions. So it's a pretty interesting time I had at Barclays the last 3 years, and certainly quite a lot of change that was implemented.
That's great, Daniel, and great to have you with us here today. Now, in many ways, we live in a very pivotal time at the moment, and the banking sector is undergoing profound change, a lot of that change being technology-driven. Then what are some of the major trends you are currently seeing?
one of the biggest ones that everybody touches on is getting all the devices networked, so you can be able to access the information that is being captured by those devices. And as Eve mentioned before, this can be a camera, this can be an access control device, an intruder detection, anything that is networked. Now, at the back of it, the other critical part is that as you have these networked, you need to secure them. You have to make sure that they are cyber protected. So you don't leave any backdoors open or expose vulnerabilities through not making sure that what's on the network is properly secured. You have got the configuration set up in a way that cannot be hacked. At the same time, the data that is captured from those devices, the metadata, and the way that it's analyzed and the way that it's shared with the other functioning areas can then inform decisions around, do we have too much kit? Do we have not enough kit? Do we utilize additional functions of the technology? How do we enhance the operational teams to make sure that those areas are secured? But at the same time, bringing in other functioning areas where the data can serve to develop that space into kind of the optimum working surface or working kind of environment. So it's not just the security systems as we used to have in typically as part of the old school planning. This is now more as a security as a service.
That's very interesting. Now, Eve, are you seeing similar trends when you are speaking to customers around the world?
Yes, I can only confirm everything what Daniel said. And also for us, one of the main trends in banking industry is a branch transformation. The banks are transforming from this bureaucratical machine towards retail and customer-friendly environment. I really like this Accenture definition, which says that there are 3 pillars of modern banking branch, which is a digital ambassador, problem solver, and trusted advisor. And when I think about it, it's so true. Like right now, when do we actually go to the branch? It's when something went wrong, we faced a fraud, or the elderly population normally needs some help in education, how to use the digital applications in the bank. And of course, the most important is this trusted advisor part when we think about the loan for education or mortgage, some really important decisions in our life when we really need this human interaction, because it feels right to actually talk to the person when you go through such a difficult time and making this change in your life. So that means that banks need to be closer to the customer. The banks need to have locations with a higher footfall to understand waiting times at the branch, and also to understand utilization of the layout of the branch. So, for example, you have this digital transformation areas, but nobody really knows, are they used, are they not used, how often do they use? Maybe you want to change it into the kids' playground and be customer oriented and service oriented from the different perspective. So, and it's also relevant to the corporate buildings. This day, many people working from home, even in a business as usual environment. So that raises the question if such a large building is needed and security system can easily give an answer to that, because all access control system events are all logged. So you practically can immediately have the answer to this question of this corporate building utilization. So another trend that we see in banking industry is outsourcing most of the services like ATMs, self-service stations, or any hardware. And our subscription offering is very well accepted. It's very easy to start this conversation. And subscription way of payment gives our end users financial surety and lower headline costs. So, Daniel, I'm wondering, at this moment of time, you're rolling out the security center globally, starting with the corporate buildings, and this year also starting to move into the branches. Could you please talk us through the genesis of this? Can you tell us where it actually started?
So just going back to my previous points, it's all around having the capability to network all your security solutions onto a platform that can be easily accessed anywhere. So we have globally, we have got 3 security centers that we operate a 24/7 model. And it's very useful and it's very helpful for us to be able to access that information anywhere at any given time, either to run a live incident or to be able to do playback, or even just to run reports on the metadata that was captured. So we had looked at how can we achieve that from what we used to have, and what value will we gain from moving into a network platform. And then we took it a step further as we started looking at moving towards a cloud solution. And really, the value and the kind of change of where we kind of started from was around how can I apply analytical capability onto my data from one storage facility, rather than having to go and extract the data from individual or standalone systems and then try to consolidate and report together. And those reports, as you mentioned, from the analytics could be anything to space optimization, to queuing times, to number of visitors, loitering, and then tying that into other functioning systems. So access control or intruder detection, validating breaches or activations. So that was our way forward.
And as you went through the evaluation of what technology, what type of systems could help your security operation, can you describe the business challenges you faced? Ideally, what were you looking for in security system, and what were some of non-negotiable requirements for the solution?
The primary one for us was we looked at this new solution not only from a security lens, but from a wider stakeholders perspective. We engaged stakeholders from an operational perspective, from a branch of the future perspective, planning of the technology networks, architecture. So there was a lot more decisions and approvals that were required. And one of the key ones, as I mentioned, because it is a networked solution, we needed to make sure that the security was tops, and we couldn't compromise on the security. That meant that the products that we were introducing had to comply to the highest standard of vulnerabilities, and had a robust plan to be able to remediate those vulnerabilities. And we went through a vigorous testing process of bringing in different companies, different manufacturers with different products, having those tested through cyber, having them tested through a compliance perspective, operational compliance perspective, security compliance perspective, looking at a global support structure. If we needed to roll out a piece of kit, do we have local support from the manufacturer? What's the lead times for delivery? So those kind of key elements that we measured all the systems together. And I guess the kind of bottom line non-mover for us was that it had to comply to security standards. And we were looking at a partnership with the manufacturer that could accommodate, not only from a technology perspective, but also from a cost model, to roll this out globally. It wasn't just per region. And the system needed to, as I said, to comply to our specification. And it wasn't a typical off-the-shelf box solution in a way.
Very interesting, Daniel. You mentioned the importance of including stakeholders from across the organization. How important is the sense of security for your end clients, for your customers? And is it possible to simultaneously address the security issues while improving the customer experience?
It's very important, particularly that the functionality of the security systems plays a wider role. So you do not want to just introduce a new technology without having the buy-in or the understanding from the stakeholders. And the stakeholders we refer to are not only our key functioning areas, but it's also our end users. So if we look at our own employees, they consider the stakeholders, because we want to make sure that they feel safe. In a typical branch, if you have a camera, then you would also want to have a microphone to be able to capture abuse or any other sort kind of day-to-day activity that the staff might be experiencing. On the other hand, it's also our clients. We started looking at introducing cameras into the ATMs. So obviously, naturally, we need to have the buy-in from a data privacy perspective of whether this is going to be acceptable or not, what value does it play. So having a sound kind of a decision-making process and understanding which stakeholders need to be part of the decision and then getting the buy-in requires quite a lot of explaining time and kind of putting together a business case that is adding value to those functioning areas, and you're not getting a positional challenges. So even though I was building a security system and a security integrated solution, I knew that at the end of the day, the objectives and the functions of the security solutions are going to serve a wider community.
It's very interesting, Daniel. So transformational change tends to transcend organizational boundaries and roles. Let's talk about the decision process you went through at Barclays, the executives you needed to engage with, as you said, from multiple departments. What are some of the challenges in cooperation that you encountered, and how did you address them?
I think the biggest one was that change is always difficult to accept. So you needed to make it extremely clear where the values were and how is that going to be implemented over what time. So it's understanding the cost, value, benefit is one of them. Second one, as I said, it's the stakeholders that are getting engaged, and different stakeholders might have different requirements of the system. So the system has to be flexible enough that you can switch on and switch off specific features or certain features. And that also plays out true that it's a global system. So in some regions, you might not be able to roll out a specific feature because of local legislation and constraints. So as you're looking at a global rollout and as you're looking at a confirmation and approvals, it requires a lot more engagement, a lot more knowledge share, and a lot more validation before you can even start installing things. It's just having that theoretical practice from end to end agreed and understood before it is, before you get any funding in place to start rolling this out.
Interesting. What, based on your experience, what is the advice you would give to banks facing similar challenges?
I think the most important one is to understand the requirements from those stakeholders around what is the end goal and what is it is trying to achieve. If we are looking at a network solution where you want to get the benefits of the metadata and you want to be able to have remote access, particularly as Eve touched on now, is a perfect example to have a look at it. Do you need to send employees or engineers to maintain those systems, or can you do it remotely? If you're going to do it remotely, are you secured enough to be able to open those platforms, to be able to log in and extract that information? So it's understanding all those requirements in the first instance. I would say, secondly, making sure that you understand the stakeholders need to be involved, because as a security system moves into a security as a service, you could find yourself in a position where the funding for the solution can come from different streams rather than just a security budget. So it's understanding those stakeholders as well. And I think the third one is also having a realistic timeline to get this implemented, so you don't set the objectives in an unrealistic time frame where people will start losing interest in your solution. They will start losing interest in what's the end game and goal. So it's having clear, decisive milestones and planning strategies to roll out each step and having the right approvals for each step.
Daniel, actually, I'm sitting here wondering how many people, so can you give us a scale? How many people were involved in this decision making? You say there's a lot of stakeholders, but just give us the scary number.
It's not really a scary number, but it is a significant amount. So from our center team here in the UK, we had, I would remember, roughly around 10. And because this is a global system, we needed to involve our region as well. So we had around 5 from the regions as well. So the process and the challenges of getting all those stakeholders in play is time, obviously, right? So if you break it down into smaller chunks to go through each kind of functionality of the system or the value of the system, it makes it a lot easier than trying to bring everybody onto one meeting, onto one conference, and try to go through everything on one kind of round. So if you break it down and you plan this out and address each requirement from each functioning area, it makes it a lot easier, and it's not really as scary as it sounds.
Okay. And since we're a manufacturer and you're the end customer for us, my next question will be, what is the role of a system integrator in this project for you?
Once again, the system integrator that we had to look at is also, it has to be an integrator that understands the system. I think that's the key value of it. But as well understands the different requirements in region or even in country from that system. Because as I mentioned, we didn't want an out-the-box solution. We wanted to make sure that this system functions to those compliance requirements. So the integrator, first of all, has to be knowledgeable enough on the product. They have to understand the processes of rolling this product out. And key for us was that they need to understand the way that we work in our environment. So when you start looking at networks, and when you start looking at IP addresses, and when you start looking at commissioning, there is a process of who do you need to engage with, who do you need to have on the other side of the line when it comes to commissioning. You cannot just select random IP addresses or choose how you want to allocate those IP addresses. You have to follow protocols that we have internally. So the more you bring in the integrator into the conversations around the deployment strategy and give them visibility of who to engage if they need support internally from the organization, it makes it a lot easier. So the earlier you can bring the integrator into discussions around the plan, the deployment strategy, commissioning, and then the final handover, the easier it is at the end, and it saves a lot of headaches.
Okay, clear. Okay, so let me take you back to the cloud requirement. How did that work for you after the decision of migration to the cloud was made? But as I understand, you were seeing some roadblocks on the way, and just can you walk us through? Because I'm sure that you were counting on some return on investment horizon as well. So that would be very interesting to hear.
Yes, most certainly, and I think that's a key one when it comes to business planning or presenting your business case to get funding for this requirement. And cloud is a big buzzword everybody tends to use, but not many understand what's involved. And for us particularly, that was true when we looked at all new builds. That's quite easy because you can set your requirements. You can make sure that your infrastructure is in place to the bandwidth requirements that you have. And then you just put a figure behind it, and you do a cost comparison between on-prem solution and how much you pay per recording channel, and how much it would cost you if you move it into cloud. But the biggest challenge is actually if you look at your legacy systems, where you do have requirements for a bigger bandwidth and constraints on those bandwidths. There is an investment required to upgrade the bandwidth, and then you have to look at resilience. So it's understanding of space, because it's completely different in a corporate environment or a smaller retail environment where you might not have facilities to plan for on-prem solutions, and you have to go into cloud. So it's around justification of what are we going to be doing in that space, and how much it's going to be costing us, and when are we going to start seeing value for it. And it goes back to my original point that because now that value comes not only from the security system, but from the honest metadata, you can get the other stakeholders to buy into the solution and share the burden of the costs with the other functioning areas, the other stakeholders.
Very interesting, Daniel. Now, going back again to the current environment where a lot of us are working remotely, when organizations have teams working remotely in fragmented locations, how do you think that is going to change the industry's attitude towards cloud-based solutions?
From my perspective, there's definitely a value to be had, not only from a simple task as maintenance or preventative maintenance, having the capability to be able to diagnose a lot of the problems remotely, but I think it's also from a data privacy and logistics perspective. If you have old systems where you have on-prem solutions, particularly if they stand alone, you need to be able to extract that information, that footage or the logs, to be able to run a report afterwards. So if you kind of start looking at those small costs or those repetitive costs, and as I said, on the other hand, the data management. So if you extract video for a post-incident event, you have to have a kind of end-to-end process of video handover, and everything kind of tallies up, everything costs. And then when you compare that, of having a solution that you can access remotely from a cloud platform with the right resilience, with the right security measures, it starts making sense, a great deal of sense, particularly if you want to be able to access that globally 24/7, if you have a requirement for that.
Very interesting, Daniel. Now, one of the key buzzwords in the banking industry today is branch transformation. What do you think the next big change in the industry is going to be?
From what I've observed from my time working in our environment, it's all around making sure that people that come to the branch use the time as effectively as possible. We know that the typical trend of coming and doing banking has moved towards online, particularly that everybody's got a mobile device or a computer at home, and they can do quite a lot of this at home. So the way that we look at transforming, it's more around moving towards automation. So if you can do a lot of the things for yourself, the only time you're going to spend in branch is to actually see an individual for a specific reason. Being able to have that information on hand, or being able to kind of utilize your time wisely in the branch, adds value to the clients, adds value to the customers. But from a different perspective, from the edge devices that we're rolling out in those branches, is understanding the full capability of those edge devices to harness as much of the data. And it is not only video, it's also the functionality of analytics overlaying that video, or the access or the intruder panels, or any kind of things that can trigger a specific input to start formulating or putting together some sort of an overlay of a map or just a pattern on a trend. And then that feeds in back to the business to say, do we need so much space? What is the resource required to accommodate our clients at a given time of the week? Or how many stations do we require for people to be able to do their own transactions? So it is moving towards an automated environment, but at the same time, it's moving towards a more, I would say, planned out environment.
Very good. Let's actually take a little bit of a pause here and reflect on some of the things we've heard so far during the session. And I've noted down four key takeaways. The first is clearly that silos in the banking sector are the ice age. It's time to move on. Silos do not allow for a unified view or access to data and information. They're inefficient, they're costly, and they don't utilize the potential of the latest technology solutions available. Secondly, you will need to develop a strategy towards cloud-based solutions now, because that is what you will need in order to derive these benefits. You will need to plan ahead. Planning and testing is one of the things you mentioned, Daniel, is absolutely critical in order to be successful when you move towards digital solutions. And finally, communication internally is absolutely key, as you will need to involve stakeholders from across the organizations. You will need to incorporate multiple perspectives, and you will need to get buy-in from across the organization. Now, based on some of these key takeaways, many people listening in are probably thinking, what do I do first? What is your advice on some of the first initial steps that banks should be taking?
I think the first step is most certainly understanding what is the current state of the nation that you have. In other words, what it is that you have, the systems, how are they connected? The ones that are connected, are there any vulnerabilities? So doing a deep analysis of what is the current solution that you are operating in, and then moving once you do have that visibility and you understand fully what's connected, what's not, getting the requirements from those functioning areas, as I mentioned, for those stakeholders to build out a replacement. And I would say there has to be a kind of a realistic approach to this, because obviously not everything's going to happen the next day. This is going to be a staged approach, and in most cases is going to be a long journey. So you need to make sure that those milestones that you are trying to hit, you do have a source of revenue to be able to kind of pay for it. You do have the SMEs, and you do have the relationship with the manufacturers to be able to provide you with those functions in those regions, or switch off those functions in those regions. But I think also key is the understanding of who those stakeholders are to buy into the solution. Communication is key, as always, and it's demonstrating the value of the systems, not only from a security perspective, which is a key driver, and it's a physical and a cybersecurity world, but as well the element of that security system as a service to the rest of your environment, your stakeholders.
Excellent. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing your experience and insights from Barclays' journey towards digital change. Now, I would like to hand over to Eve, who will share an overview of Genetec's banking solutions. Eve.
Thank you for this chance. So I believe that by now you might see my screen and my slide. So this is what we prepare in a way how we understand connected bank. So of course we start from the video system. So we have the video management in place. Video management can be on premises, and well, still in 75% of the cases, it can be in the cloud. For the remote operator, it doesn't really matter where it's located. So important is that today you still might find yourself with an infrastructure which doesn't allow you to move to cloud quick, but you need to have a solution which, when you're ready, will allow you to move smoothly towards the cloud without changing the interface, without changing pretty much anything else except location of that video archives. So once video management is done, we need to think, okay, what are the basics which we need to take care of? And these are cybersecurity and camera health monitor. So when we talk about camera health monitor, we're looking into our cameras are positioned correctly, are they redirected? Are they under attack? So if anything is all right. And cybersecurity tools, it's quite straightforward. We're looking for, are the passwords changed? Are the firmwares changed? You will be very surprised, but only in 20% of the systems out there you have the latest firmwares installed in the systems. And that means that the system might be straightforward vulnerable. So basics. So once that is done, we start to add subsystems, access control to have keyless branch or corporate building, synchronization video with access control information, reporting. We're talking about integrating ATM software so we can synchronize. If somebody is loitering in front of the ATM for 20 minutes from the video analytical perspective and the software does any transaction, the question is why. So that can go and alert the guard, for example. We are talking about video analytics if someone is loitering or starting to sleep in the banking foyer, because this is one of the issues when the homeless people are trying to stay overnight. We can integrate it with the audio system in the camera, and then we can just send an alarm saying that please leave the premises without engaging with the police. So again, we're saving resources, we're saving resources of the community as well. All of it can be integrated into one monitoring, central monitoring facility. It can, operator, instead of working with the video and a lot of different alarms, can work with the standard or dynamic operational procedures, which in practice mean that operator is going to be guided through what he needs to do instead of just thinking about it. So we take the human factor away. And once all security is covered, again, we think we already see the customer. Why don't we count people? Why don't we understand queuing times? And again, we develop the algorithms which allow us to do it in the private way, so in the GDPR compliant way, so we are not interfering with the privacy of the customer, anonymizing the data right away. So many more solutions. I will be happy to answer to all of these questions on Twitter. Just contact me directly. You've seen my name on the invitation. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to share more. But I think then overall, the important to understand that this is the platform which allows to inject data. The data which is available today and the data which will be available in the next generation of deep learning algorithms and so on, and to create the least and the little amount of data we need to deal with. So that's pretty much an overview.
Thank you so much, Eve, for the overview of Genetec's banking solutions. Now, as Eve said, if you have any questions either for her or for Daniel, please tweet them using the Genetec Twitter handle, which is @Genetec_Europe. Now, this marks the end of today's webinar on securing your journey towards digital change. We hope you have enjoyed it and found it informative. We will send out an email with an opportunity to provide feedback, and we would love to hear from you, your questions, your suggestions, and your feedback. Now, I would like to thank both of my guests today, Daniel Lanecki from Barclays and Evgenia Ostrovskaya from Genetec. This is Morten Jorgensen from RBR, thanking you for listening in. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.